Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today, Iowa Joe from Green Bay and I are going to be going over our 53-man roster predictions. We'll see if Joe's hotel internet holds out as we get through this. So we're going to try and snap through this one as quick as we can, but giving as much insight as we can as well. Joe, first off though, I know that one of the things you're concerned about was the weather. How has it been in Green Bay?
It's held out pretty good. I was really worried about this past Tuesday, but the rain seemed to be like an early morning thing, and then it kind of cleared out after that. Yesterday, I didn't. I had no ambition to go to the game just because the back was hurting me, so I didn't feel like climbing any of the stairs and that. So I just vegged in the hotel room all day. Matter of fact, I was so friggin' beat from my lack of sleep that I ended up sleeping through the game and having to watch a replay of it. So it's been a fun trip up here. I love coming up here, and even if the weather is shit, I mean, it got pretty hot. If the people could see, they could see I got kind of red on a couple of days, even though I was putting the sunscreen on pretty heavily. But yeah, weather held out. I think we'll save the rest of my complaints for another episode because, I don't know how the internet's going to hold out. Right now, it's doing pretty good, but I have had some touch and go here and there.
Yeah, we'll just briefly recap the game. Honestly, outside of the four turnovers and Golden's big reception, you didn't miss much, really, to be totally honest. Basically, once Dobbs the touchdown for the first team offense, the quote unquote first team offense, LaFleur did whatever was the equivalent of sim to end in a preseason game. It really just felt like they kind of were, as much going through the motions kind of thing. Like he was calling a lot of run plays, not many passes. Between the three quarterbacks, they threw the ball 23 times. 27 dropbacks because they were sacked four times, and nothing really exciting. I will say that it did seem like there are play calling operations seemed to go a lot smoother than it had been the past couple games. I do think that we saw a progression of ironing out any sort of kinks and wrinkles out of the system, so that's good to see. But otherwise, I mean, Love wasn't playing, so you weren't going to learn too much. I did think Willis's interception was more shit luck than it was like a bad decision on his part. Like it wasn't the greatest throw, but also like weird things kind of just happened on that play. And it's one of those, we keep going back to it, but it's the try a new pitch in the training camp for starting pitchers kind of thing. And I didn't have too much issue with it. The defense basically got the ball right back, and it was good to see the defense make plays. But this Seattle O line, we played against their starters last regular season, and it wasn't great. And they were playing a lot of their backups, and they're obviously not great. So it's good to see guys convert opportunities, but and of course, like clockwork, it is not the whole. Joe, as I was saying before, my internet cut out, not the crappy Green Bay Wi-Fi internet. So those were my quick thoughts on the game. How did you feel about it?
I thought Willis was playing pretty good. I do agree that the play calling seemed to have been a little bit more aggressive and more open, even though it was a ton of running. But I do understand why they were running it a lot more because they're trying to see what backs they want to keep. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is the starter, the man, the whatever you want to call him. There's no way that he gets beat out by anybody. It's after that. We know what Emmanuel Wilson can do. We kind of know what Chris Brooks can do, but then you got the long list of other guys that are in there. Amar Johnson, Izzy Abin. I always screw up his friggin' Bonnie Conda. And I love that guy. I've loved him since the 2023 draft. But you've got all those guys in there that you know to fill maybe two open spots, maybe one open spot for running back. Depending on how they feel about Wilson and Brooks. and I can't throw Marshawn Lloyd in there because we don't know quite where he's at with his injury recovery. I know they keep saying it's a hamstring or a soft tissue issue. How long is it going to keep him out? Do they just throw him on IR and call it good? What do they do with it? I'm so confused about how the rules are with that stuff anymore. That because it used to be that if they IR'd you before final cuts, you were done for the season. But now it's something like you can be IR'd, but uh, you return in 4 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, you have to be designated immediately or something like that. They keep adjusting it. I do like the adjustments they've made to it, but you're right, it does make keeping track of what's going on with that a little bit of a bear because it's like what's the rule now?
Yeah. And then there's a lot of open spots along the offensive line that I guess Banks has some kind of injury, so that's why he's been kind of held out of things. So how long is that gonna, hold him out? So they were kind of showing yesterday what their plans would be, which is Walker at left tackle and Morgan at left guard. But if Banks is out for any long period of time, then who's your backup and all that other stuff. But defense looked decent. Again, preseason is hard to tell a lot of that things just because of vanilla play calling and stuff like that. But you know, I thought it was pretty decent. Everything for the most part looked good. There were some things on the defense that probably, if it was a regular season, I would be a little bit more worried about. But being that they were the fringe bubble players, I'm not overly concerned. But it just kind of sucks when it comes down to, I was stressing over my prediction on the 53 man. I can just imagine what LaFleur and Goody are going through to make the actual decisions.
Yep. So on that note, let's just dive in. Let's just kind of get rolling with it. So quarterbacks. Okay, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go position by position? Do you want to do a off the bat count of what you got at each position, or you want to just
We can
roll with
just
it?
go position by position with, obviously there's going to be some spots that are like with quarterbacks right now. It's obviously Jordan Love and Malik Willis. There
Yep.
may be a question of keeping a third, but I think it's going to be a practice squad guy unless I here's my prediction on quarterback. Clifford's gone. Elgersma is the guy on the practice squad unless he gets claimed. If he gets claimed, then it'll obviously be Clifford on the practice squad with Jordan Love and Malik Willis as your active quarterbacks.
No dispute there.
Running backs is kind of the same way. Josh Jacobs again is your main guy. I've got it as Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, and Chris Brooks, and that's how I
And
see
Lloyd
it
on
planning
IR.
out. Yeah, with Lloyd going to IR, or however they've got to do that, and then of course a guy like Abani Konda or Amar Johnson on the practice squad.
I think they'll try to stash both of them. Honestly, they running back is a position they've I feel like tended to double up on the practice squad at. So I agree.
Unless they keep Abani Konda around for his special teams play.
Right. And so I agree with you that they're only keeping three running backs. This is a position where it gets into that whole, like you said, for the special teams impact. This is one where they could go for because they don't have a fullback. Traditionally, Green Bay has kept kind of like a between running back, fullback, tight end. They've kept like seven ish, eight ish guys. And it's like three running backs. It's generally been three running backs, three tight ends, and a fullback. Like that's sort of been the mix. But because they don't have a fullback, it opens up that seventh ish spot, and it could be a running back. I don't think it'll be a well. It could, and this is where it kind of gets into the. It's basically Bonnie Conda against a Fitzpatrick. That's how I view it coming down to. So, but I agree with you. I think Fitzpatrick, they've got a little more invested in him. He basically was on the roster the whole season last year. He does have some upside as a blocking option. And I thought this preseason he showed a little better as a receiver than he did last year. We have one of our group chats where I wasn't too pleased with it, but I guess we'll kind of just morph into tight end since I'm going there. I've got them keeping four to kind of get us to that seven number that I kind of brought up. So Kraft, Musgrave, Sims, and then Fitzpatrick is like the like if you want to put it in pencil, that's one of those like light positions that I'm not certain how serious they are about keeping, but that's one of my I want to say surprise, but could go either way spots on the roster.
Fitzpatrick is a late addition to my 53 man. I had went a different way with my offensive line, and then I got to thinking about some things with it, so I kind of changed there, and that left me one spot open. So I won't put Fitzpatrick. Not that I think he's going to be a make or break guy, because I think they could hold steady with just their three of Kraft, Musgraves, and Sims, but just I couldn't find anybody anywhere else to add that extra man to, so I just threw Fitzpatrick in there. I do agree that it could be an either or, and it's gonna. And the funny thing is we've argued about this over the last few years about special teams. Special teams. Do you keep a guy just because of special teams? And Abaniconda kind of fits that, where yes, you know what you're going to get at him as a running back, but he showed well as a kick returner. I don't remember him getting anything at punt return, so I don't think they're going to trust him there. But it makes the roster decisions go a little bit more. So with that, we'll jump right into wide receivers since we're agreeing on so much of it so far anyway. Again, wide receiver, we know who the top guys are going to be, but we don't know what that fringe roster is. So obviously, you've got Golden, Dobbs, Reed, Romeo, or I said Romeo. So you got Golden, Dobbs, Reed, and
Wicks.
then I put Christian on the pup list. I just carried
Yeah.
him over to the pup list. So he's going to be on the team. He's just not on the initial 53 man per se. I, there's two of them that I'm not sure about. And it's not that they're not capable of making the roster. It's this is where the whole unsure of how the IR thing works, because you got Savion Williams and Dontavian Wicks who have not played anything during the preseason, who have been held out of practice for the longest time because of injuries. But with Savion, you've got a third round pick invested into him, and Wicks, you've got time invested into them. So I have them on my roster just because I'm not sure how they're going to handle those two guys, because it's not it could be something as simple as they make the initial 53 and then they immediately IR them, because I think they can call those guys back easier than they can a pre-cut IR. But again, I'm not sure how that works. But the only surprise one, and I just sent him, or Dusty Evely was asking for people to watch on Breakdown, and I put this guy's name out there on Blue Sky just because it seems like he popped up everywhere making plays, and he added special teams, and that's Will Shepard. He was a late addition to the roster going into the preseason, but he's made the most of everything. I know this falls into the trap every year where there's always that one or two guys that seem to pop up everywhere. And, oh, yeah, you can't get rid of him. You can't get rid of him because somebody will claim him. Well, I think Will Shepard falls into that. I think it'll be a lot easier to get him to the practice squad. But again, he adds special teams, he adds to the receiving core, which is kind of dinged up right now. So that's where I'm setting on things. Do you differ from anything on there?
Okay, so after a quick Google search, you still do have to carry guys on the 53, like you have to carry them through the cut down deadline. So, okay, now that makes the math a little weirder on my end. So, okay, seeing that I'm fuck. Okay, so I'm cutting Fitzpatrick and I'm keeping Lloyd, but then immediately putting Lloyd on IR and signing Fitzpatrick back. So like however you want to look at that as who makes the 53, Lloyd makes it, but Fitzpatrick is really making the initial 53 man roster, if that makes sense. And a similar point for, so I agree with you that the top four healthy are in no particular order: Golden, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks. Like, they're making it. Savion is gonna make it. I don't know. I have a feeling he's going on IR though after the cutdowns, because we just have gotten nothing regarding what the hell his injury actually is at this point. So I get the feeling that they're gonna just put him on IR. He's too has had a bunch of soft tissue injuries, so it's like, just put him on IR, get him in a rehab program. Don't like accelerate it and all that kind of crap. Just let it play itself out, and then then that gets you to the fifth, and then so I think Hardman's gonna make it. He's still the top punt returner. I'm not. God, it's so hard to see because you can see them pumping opportunities to Heath all preseason, and he falls into a similar category with the, like you talked about, a Shepard or my guy Cornelius Johnson, where, or even a Hicks, where those guys have flash, but the quarterback play has been inconsistent, the line play has been inconsistent, so it's hard to get a read, and those guys aren't gonna play unless the worst happens to the guys ahead of them. So I think that I've got six. I've got Golden, Dobbs, Wicks, Reed, Savion, Hardman, and then, like I said, I just, because we don't have any real, we're not insiders. We don't know what's going to happen with Savion. I can't tell you if he's staying, or and they're going to just wait it out, or if they're going to immediately turn around and put him on IR, and maybe that opens the door for a Shepard or a Johnson to make the roster. But I've got six.
Yeah, I've got six right now too, but I'll be honest, I'm not completely sold on Wicks as lock. And because we haven't been able to see him do anything in the preseason to show that he's at least working on his drops. Because I've said this before, I'll say it again. You can be the best route runner in the world, but if you can't catch a ball, that does nothing. So I'm not sold on him as a lock, but I think right now with everything pointing, and this is just the initial 53. This isn't including, the whole Marshawn Lloyd to IR, cut one. So this is just the initial. So I guess I would have to do the same thing. Lloyd would probably be my guy, and Fitzpatrick would get a cut. But
Yeah.
I I don't know. I love Malik Heath. Everybody knows I love Malik Heath. I don't know if he's shown more than, because even it sounded like a lot of the talk from Kevin Harlan and John Kuhn was that he just, they kept talking about how he used to be the pit bull and the guy that was the blocker and stuff like that in past tense. So it's like, okay, is he not doing it anymore, or is somebody better than him at it?
It was weird to hear them talk about him in that regard. You're right. It was odd. It was really odd to hear that tone with him. But this is one of the, like, I know we're gonna sound like a broken record repeating this a lot, but there's just gonna be a lot of these positions where, because we don't have insider info, it's gonna be hard to tell what's gonna happen at some of these spots outside of the locks. But we won't get stuck in the mud there. O lineman, I've got eight.
Okay, so
And
I broke this down differently where I have tackle, guard, center. So I broke it down
okay, go for
to
it.
specifics. I think totally I've got 10.
Oh,
And this is where I said that it was kind of hard to, I kept flip flopping a lot of these and I kept cutting and read. So I settled on 10 just because as I kept looking, the interior line is lacking the depth. The tackle portion seems pretty set that they have a one and two, they're two people deep. Whereas the interior didn't seem that. So I had to really try to, and I struggled with it. So my tackles are obviously Morgan, Tom, Belton, and Walker. I threw in Brant Banks because his name keeps popping up everywhere as a guy that really has that could be a sleeper to make the 53. I didn't pay close attention to offensive line play, but I know they weren't horrible. And, they are going to need a swing tackle per se. So that fits in there. And I know Morgan is probably going to slot in as a backup, the guard position, however they want to play that out. My guards are obviously Banks, Ryan, and then I threw Tyler Cooper in there. I wanted to throw John Williams in there, but John Williams falls into that whole thing where he hasn't practiced or anything all
Yeah,
preseason.
he's a pup lock. Like it's not too much of a mystery to me.
Yeah, so I wanted to put him on there, but again, all that stuff. So I put Tyler Cooper just to add that little bit of depth. And then obviously my center is Elton Jenkins. And I brought in Lasitis Smith as the backup. I think they're probably going to cut Jacob Monk, or he'll end up as a pup guy because again he's been out for like the last week and a half or whatever, not doing anything. And I don't think he played at all of this game against the Seahawks, did he?
Uh yeah, I can't remember at this point. Um
I know he wasn't in pads both Tuesday and Thursday for the Opus practices.
yeah. Yeah, I'd have to look. Great
And matter of fact, I
podcasting.
think on
Yeah.
Friday when they were going down for the walkthrough, he was in bare minimums.
Yeah. So, yeah. I went in a totally different route. I only got 8 on the O line, and it's something that I was honestly kind of thinking of, but then what is Perone's Mark Eckel, his Perone's pack a day co-host. It's something that Echo responded to one of my tweets about. Is he's like, the backup O line has underwhelmed so much. He goes, don't be surprised if they go to the waiver wire to get some guy, kind of like how they got Lycidas Smith last year or the year before. And I
Right.
kind of see it that way, where like, so the starting five plus one, because who knows what they're gonna do at left tackle. Like I don't know whether they've fully seen enough from Morgan or if they're gonna stick with Walker. So you have those two, Banks, Elton, Ryan, Tom, and then what's it called? Belton is my seventh, and then my eighth. I know I'm one of the last people on this island, but I think they're like, he's only a year two. Let's still see if there's something there with Jacob Monk. And then Lecidus almost made it, but he's in that realm of like, and so this is why I went with 8, is because you've got those guys like Savion, Marshawn Lloyd. I'm sure there's a couple more that are escaping my mind right now where they're on that fringe. Oh, and Sorrell. So those are the three that are like at the top of the list of, are they keeping them, or and they're just going to be game day inactives until they're healthy. I know Sorrell of the three is the most like he could play week one out of the three of them, or are they gonna IR him once the deadline, the 53-man cut down deadline passes, and then whether you bring Lesidus back after you cut him or you go and look on the waiver wire at other positions. So this is one where I agree they've never gone under 8, but I don't see 10 guys who deserve to make this roster out of the gates. And like I said, even Monk, it could be Lecidus very easily because Monk did not have a good preseason. And I still think there's a lot of ability there with him as a center, but they obviously don't trust him enough because they were still trying to make sure that Ryan was ready to play center snaps if all hell should break loose. But then also like Lecidus wasn't getting reps with the second line in the preseason either. And I know those had to go to Sean Ryan at center and all that kind of stuff, but it's just so much up in the air with that group. So I do think it's a position where they cut down to 8 and they go hunting on the waiver wire. And if not, I don't think any of the guys they cut are getting claimed by anyone else. And so it's like, if they don't find anyone, you can bring a Telfort back. You can bring whichever of Lecidus Smith or Jacob Monk you cut back. You can easily get Donovan Jennings back because he didn't have a good preseason either.
The last game he was decent, but
Yeah,
the rest of the time, yeah. And to
yeah.
be honest, I think if they hadn't spent a second round pick on Anthony Belton, Belton would have been cut yesterday.
Oh yeah, like the fact that you and I joked last week that LaFleur looked like he just wanted to cold cock him coming off the field at halftime. He definitely cleaned it up. He had a much better game this week, but he still had a couple penalties and stuff. And it's one thing that Mafi pointed at is like this dude is a 6 year senior, so he's 24, and he's got both those kind of mental mistakes and technique issues. And it's like, you're 24. Like, it's hard to, there are already concerns when you're just getting better at one of them. But when you're that old and you got to get better at both of them, it's kind of like, ugh. But they're going to, like you said, they're definitely sticking it out. They're not cutting a second round pick kind of thing. This isn't Jimmy Johnson with the early 90s Cowboys where it's like,
No,
screw it, get me a better guy kind of
if
thing.
he'd been like a fifth round pick or something, I
Oh yeah,
guarantee he'd been gone.
Goot would have broken his all my rookies make the the opening day roster trend. Um, that's just where I'm at with the line. So I'm at 23 players on offense.
I'll be
I
honest,
think
I don't know what my
you're
totals
at
are right now. I
you're
just
at
know it out
25.
equals out to 53.
I think you're at 25. And let's just get the elephant out of the room already. The three specialists, the Celtic Cannon is a stone cold lock, especially
Yeah.
so long as Matt Orzek is your long snapper, because someone has to track down the spray and pray long snaps, and no one has been better at that than the Celtic Cannon. Also, he's had a dynamic preseason. I know it's hot, and so punting is easier and all that kind of shit, but he's clocked some punts this preseason. And I know, neither of us are the biggest fans, and he's had sort of a he had the he started off perfect and then he had a couple bad days, but McManus had a good final preseason game, and he's going to be the kicker at least for this year, and we'll see moving forward. But so that's three other spots. Defense, you want to start on the back seven or the front seven?
Okay, so again, I broke these down as defensive end, defensive tackle.
Yep.
So, I'll go with my ends, and of course, you got Gary Van Ness and Brenton Cox. I believe are your three locks. Enigbare is probably a lock, but he's not a 100% lock. I think he's around just because fourth round pick and him being able to play sooner than later is a lock. So those are my ends: Gary, Van Ness, Sorrell, Cox, and Enigbare. And my defensive linemen are obviously Clark and Wyatt. I kept both Brinson and Stackhouse, and I got Carl Brooks. I don't think Wooden has shown enough to warrant keeping him on the active. If they can sneak him through to the practice squad, let him develop, let him figure out, because he's still undersized to be a lineman
Right.
and perfect size to be an end. So those are my guys. So I think what I'm at, I got 10 defensive linemen.
Yeah. So I had 11, and basically I kept Wooden. Um, and I
Okay.
I kept the same because I'm just not certain what they're doing with Sorrell, and I know that they're not necessarily bumping any of those interior guys. I know Wyatt played some snaps on the end last year. Hafley got a little frisky on third down packages and stuff, but I agree with you that those are the guys that they're keeping. I think Enigbare had a good close preseason after having like a really quiet and disappointing start to it. So I think, like you said, I don't think he's a stone cold lock, but I think he's closer to like the 80% of making the roster, especially with Sorrell's uncertainty. I thought Sorrell was having a really good preseason up until the moment he got his knee messed up on that punt down in Indy last week. So
The
I
only
think those,
thing that I can say is if they think Alexander did a better job than Enigbare all around.
and I can see it, but also I don't think anyone's claiming Alexander. And he's a guy that it's like, if Sorrell goes on IR after he makes the final roster, Alexander's a guy that maybe they bring back. I can see it too. And obviously, like, do you try and I can't remember if Mosby has practice squad eligibility, but between
He
him and
should.
Alexander, yeah, I think you're gonna try and stash him. So you've got You
Because what
got
is it? He spent a little bit of time on the practice squad a couple years ago. Then he was pretty much on the main roster all year last
yeah.
year. So he
So
should have plenty of eligibility left.
regardless of how they count it, he should have one more year. He should have the third year regardless. Linebacker, who you got?
Well, obviously, I've got Cooper Walker and McDuffie. Those are your three locks for sure. I did keep Christian Welch and Tyron Hopper just because they both played well. Hopper's looking good. Welch isn't going to be your guy that you put in coverage unless you need him to be. He's okay in coverage, but he's never going to be elite in coverage. But he's going to be your downhill guy. He's going to be your spy in the middle, that type of thing, and he's going to give you the special teams of it. Hopper, I think, is going to give you a better all around type linebacker with some of the special teams. The only one that and I'll put this out there because people are going to ask why I don't have Oliver on my 53. That's because he'll end up on pup. He's
Yeah,
already on the preseason pup. He'll end up on pup going into the season too.
he's in the same boat to me as Williams. There's no way he can make up for not, being a rookie who didn't
Right.
practice at all. Like there's just no way.
The only
Um,
other one that possibly could make the roster because he showed pretty well this last game, that's that Johnson kid out of Kentucky.
I think he's a practice squad guy. I've
Right.
got
I'm just saying that if they were thinking of keeping like a sixth one, that would probably be him.
he's another guy that falls into the if those any of those three that we've talked about go on IR, he's got consideration. I agree with you. I've got
And
the
I
same
do
five.
not think it's going to be Isaiah Sims. I know a lot of people are talking, but he can't. He's got the athletic ability, but he
It's just
can't do
not.
it.
It hasn't translated to football play. That is what it is.
And
I
I think a
forget.
lot of it is he's just too much in his head on things.
Yeah, like you said, it would be interesting if they could get him back on the practice squad, try and let him gel with Halfley's system a little longer. Yeah, that's what's hard too. Is everyone forgets he was a late signing. He didn't sign at the opening of free agency or anything. I think he signed in like April or May or something like that. So it's not like he spent the whole offseason. I've got the same five as you. No real need to like spin the yarn or anything here. I agree. The only reason I have a little hesitation on Simmons is he still was getting the number one gunner snaps opposite of Melton. That made my eye twitch. Like I said, I'm totally against keeping guys just for
But
special
not
teams
just
prowess.
that, he wasn't playing good on special teams.
And that's the thing too. Everyone's like, "Oh, he was still the top gunner," but I'm like, did you watch the indie game? Like I said, when he got juked by a guy who dropped the ball, he didn't get juked by that guy after he made a move. He got juked by him dropping the football. Like that can't freaking happen. That was one of those like, are you serious, man? But so I've got the same five at linebacker, and let's just move into the secondary at this point. One note on Hopper, and this will make our buddy Joey Van Zimmeren very happy. Hopper has had a really good preseason.
He
I think
has.
that it's it. I don't think he necessarily would have looked this good last year just because he was a rookie and all that. But I am really pleased with the work he's put. You can see how much the clean bill of health has made a difference for him, and he just looks so much more explosive and athletic out there than he did last season.
And I think
Going
they
to
said, I can't remember who said it. It was either Kevin Harlan or John Kuhn, or I guess it could have been one of the radio crew, but they said that he actually put on weight and not like fat weight. He put on like lean muscle. So he's able to move around a little bit better.
I can see that. Like, if he gets up into that like 238, 240 range kind of thing, like that would be really good for him. Especially, whether he's supposed to play the Sam or like play Mike and bump Quay out to Sam. Like you can't. Mike Wall says it all the time. You can't be a 230-pound Mike linebacker. Like he's like you have to have.
Unless you're a freak.
Yeah, you have to have other special components to your defense to make that possible.
So yeah.
Secondary, corners and
Uh,
safeties. I know that that's going to be the way we break it down. I'm going to go with the safeties first, just because I think that's easier to go through. So I've got Xavier, Bullard, Evan Williams, Oladapo. I can't believe I'm saying it. I think Zane is going to make it just because At least he showed he can play some safety last year. And I think Omar Brown did enough that he gets a longer look there.
It's going to
But
depend
also,
on what the injury is
right,
because
and that's
nobody
the
has
part,
heard
right,
anything.
and that's the part where I'm kind of like, okay, and sorry, he's my fourth. Like, they might throw him a bone, make it, put him on IR, designate him to return later, potentially, kind of thing. So
So this
I've
could
got
be
some
some
safeties.
insider information, or this just could be me hearing somebody else mention, and it's just total coincidence that it was somebody named Omar. But when I was walking around Lambeau, there was a guy, of course, Packer garb on his cell phone, and he said they were flying Omar's family in. So what's that mean? Is he that hurt that they're bringing him in to help take care of him? Are they just doing it to make sure that they know he's safe? How's that working? Otherwise, I think the sad truth is, I think even Omar could have took Oladapo's spot because he was just showing that well during the preseason before the injury. But until we know what his actual injury is and what his return time's going to be, I can't say anything on him.
I think this is one where the way I've got my roster, this is the Packers rewarding Omar for that work that
Right.
he put in, and also kind of you want to wish for the best, and you don't want it to be anything like you said, where it's like, ugh, like is it that bad? But I'm like, this is also where they can kind of throw him a bone, where like he makes like an active roster. You can kind of screw around with it, where it's like the dude gets an active roster salary for a week, kind of thing and stuff, and then you kind of play the long game from there because they don't have to put him on IR until like Saturday for week one to count as the first of the 4 games, kind of thing. So there's different ways they can manage that, but I just think that he
And I'm
showed
not sure
better.
how those rules work because they can't just outright cut him, can they? Because he's injured.
Yeah, no, they'd have to injury settle him. They'd have to do an injury settlement. And then, so just a short recap, the injury settlement is basically the team, the player come together. They're like, you've got X injury, you've got a sprained ankle. Obviously, that's not what Omar has, but they're like, you got a sprained ankle. Medical says it's going to take you 4 weeks. So they give you 4 weeks worth of pay. And then you're free to sign. I think the player can sign with any team after 2 weeks, but they couldn't sign back with the team that cut them for like the settlement plus like let's say 2 weeks or something like that. I know that's not, but there's some kind of like it's a time plus X, and the time is that's the settlement part is it's agreed on between the players representation and the team kind of thing. So that's how that works. And my whole point with Omar is the way that I broke in the roster down, he showed more than any of the backup corners did to me. And that's why I've got him over any one of the who names it at corner. So, and if he is healthy, if he can be healthy, I think he just gives you another special teams player, another, potential upside guy in the back end and stuff. I thought Kitan actually played better as the preseason went along. He showed some good things in man coverage. It's
Oh
hard
yeah,
to say.
I'm not taking
Yeah.
anything out of
Oh no, but I
Catan.
agree. Like Omar definitely had the highlight, and they weren't all great throws, but you get 3 interceptions in any sort of scrimmage or preseason game, you get your gold star on the wall, and you get recognition for that.
Well, and he was
And
showing his ability throughout the preseason games before getting injured too.
yeah,
So that one, like I said, I think he could even have slotted in over Catan just because of what he was showing. It just now with the question, because it's a chest injury, we know that for almost
and that's
fact.
vague, and that's very vague.
Yeah,
So
and they had
yeah,
oxygen on him and all that shit when they were carting him back, even though he was awake and all that stuff, they still had, so it makes you wonder if it was some kind of collapsed lung type
yeah,
situation, and you can't rush back from that. You gotta take your time with that shit, especially if it was like a broken rib that would,
puncture.
punctured it. So that's why I can't count him on the 53 because it's like, yeah, I understand what the rules are, but it could be something so serious that you're just better off IRing him now and then next year come back to it.
Yeah, the only reason I haven't gone that route is they haven't done it yet. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of that's why I'm kind of like he's my fourth put him on the 53 and then cut him right after, and so you can not cut him but put him on IR at 4:01 p.m. CS or 3:01 p.m. CST so that he's eligible for IR, DR, and all that kind of stuff. But now we can swing it over to cornerback. I've only got five, and the fifth spot, I'm not going to fight you over who I had for the fifth spot. So the top four, I think, are obvious to me. I've got Hobbs, Valentine, Keyshawn, Melton. And the fifth spot, honestly, I just went for familiarity. I gave it to Corey Ballantyne, who's no one special, but he's a guy who's shown that when they throw him out there, he can handle himself against an NFL receiver. And he's not going to be a top of the line defensive back or anything close to that, but he's capable enough. And honestly, when you get to your fifth cornerback, that's all you're looking for at that point. Floor's yours, buddy.
This is where I just kind of threw shit at the wall and saw to see what sticks. Yeah, I mean Keyshawn, Carrington, Hobbs, Melton are my four guys, and it's weird throwing Melton in there just because of all the questions, and he really came out and showed that he has the ability to play the position. He's not afraid to make a hit. He's not afraid to do what he needs to do. I wish we could have saw a little bit more of the ball skill from him with an interception or whatever, but they weren't throwing to him. So that shows that they were kind of worried about it for, a little bit, because usually when you avoid a guy, you don't want him to make a play on anything. Outside of that, I threw Micah Robinson and Kalen King in there. So I've got six corners, and mainly because Micah was a draft pick, and I think Kalen King has ability. I don't think he's going to be a starter per se, but he's going to be a guy that they can rotate in, or when Halfley goes into his big DB heavy packages, that Kalen could be one of those guys or whatever. But really, I'm not sure how the secondary is going to play out, just because you're pretty slot heavy. And I know they say that Nate Hobbs can play the boundary. Okay, maybe. Carrington can play the boundary. Nixon is okay as a boundary. You figure Bo's going to be a boundary, but Nate Hobbs made his money as a slot. Javon Bullard's going to play the slot. Maybe Kalen could play the slot. Micah had decent tape from what I've seen, but he wasn't spectacular any means. I know he had a really nice coverage play yesterday, but I don't know if it was because he was playing so well, because the sun was hitting him right in the right spot, that a play wasn't made on that. But I think just because of him being a recent draft pick keeps him on there, and maybe as a special team or two. But if I were gonna say anything, this is probably where the waiver wire is really gonna hit on things. You're gonna see some names get released, and it's gonna be like, okay, the Packers are gonna pick that guy up.
Yep. But I believe we have made it to 53. And um
And then obviously that McNamee is gonna be their international guy. Again, to repeat, I have Watson and Oliver on the pup to start the season.
and Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, because if he was on the preseason pup, then yeah, he can slot over to the regular season pup. But other than that, I no real surprises. I When I was trying to put this together yesterday, I got to 39 and I was like, that's basically all you're gonna need. I mean, the rest of the 14 of them, just I it was hard to pick them.
Yep. So when we get to Tuesday, just follow our social medias. The two of us on Twitter and X are at Ohana _Packers on Twitter. The two of us on Blue Sky. we'll be posting our thoughts when the final roster comes out. Practice
Well,
squad will
maybe not me so much because Tuesday is when I drive home, so I don't know if I should be on the phone
please
that much.
don't. Yeah. So I guess I'll be doing that. And then practice squad will be set the following day. That's kind of standard operating procedure with how these things go. We'll kind of just post up how we did. Then next week we'll have our schedule prediction episode, correct?
Yeah, yeah, because that'll
So,
be the buys, quote unquote,
but
bye
yeah,
week.
yep. So Packers are going to be stirring up going into Labor Day weekend and getting ready for Week 1 against the Lions. We've kind of hinted at it over the course of the preseason that the Packers have to start the ground running. They've kind of scuffled a little bit the last couple years out of the gate, and they can't afford to do that. And they've got two big games off the bat against defending playoff teams in the Lions, the defending NFC North champs, and the Washington Commanders, who were the surprise darling team last season, who knocked the Lions out of the playoffs. So, and that's on a short week. So Green Bay's got to be ready to roll. And that you don't want to say that the season is written after 2 weeks, but if they
No.
win those two games, that can springboard them into at least an early season run that we've seen at times from this team. Like 2020, they got off the ground running. 21, they came back and got into it. Even 2019, they got the ball rolling out of the gates and started out 4-0 and all that kind of stuff. So we've seen this LaFleur squad start off fast, and you want to see that out of them this year. We said it for months. This team is intending to contend this season, and the way you do that, you've got to bank some of these big game wins, and you can't go 0-4 against your two biggest division rivals, the ones that matter, I should say, in terms of the playoff picture, and you can't lose all the games to the top contenders in your conference. It's nice to go or 5-0 against the AFC, but you got to win the conference games to get that seeding set on your side of the bracket. So, Joe, any last thoughts before we put a wrap on this one?
Just basically to say that this is our thoughts without adding in any kind of predictions on waiver wire claims, because obviously that's going to happen. There are going to be some waiver wire claims just because the bottom portion of the 53 is in flux, and the Packers always seem to bring in somebody here or there that wasn't on. I mean, this is the time of year that they traded a 7th round pick for Malik Willis, and that worked out pretty good for the Packers. So, and who knows? I mean, as much as we love seeing Malik around, and I'd hate to see him get traded, maybe there's a QB needy team that'll come in and say, "Hey, we'll give you a 4th round pick or something for Malik," and you get that kind of offer on a 7th round uh what's the word for it, investment. What do you do? Or some of these other guys, maybe a Rasheed Walker gets traded or something like that. But yeah, everything's in flux. This is just our opinions on what we see right now.
Yep. And as we noted during the episode, we are saved from all of those waiver wires because we are only talking about who makes the absolute initial 53-man roster when the clock turns to 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, the 26th. That's all we were projecting for. We were not forecasting for any subsequent moves. Like you said, the waiver claims, the guys who get put on IR with the designation to return. Like I put out, there are 4 pretty clear options. Depending on if they make the roster, 3 of them are almost locks to be on the roster because of what they could bring to the table. But yeah, we'll see where this team is at, and we'll have that all for you next week when we reconvene after they make the final roster set up and really start game planning for week 1. But until then, that's Iowa Joe. I'm Mike. Go Pack Go, and aloha.
When you run a business, there are a lot of boxes to check.
Let's see. Payroll? Check. Inventory? Check. Insurance? Ah.
Well, Good Thing Simply Business makes getting small business insurance fast and easy. Just answer a few questions, review your quotes, and get covered in under 10 minutes, all online. It's that simple. Check insurance off your list at simplybusiness.com.